Let me just get this machine set up here. Okay, and make sure that you're looking straight in the machine when you answer questions. What is your name?
Kyle Mulford.
Date of birth?
I don't want to give out that information.
Interesting. Okay, sir, and just make sure that you're looking at my little eye laser here. And all right, you come across a turtle on the side of the road, and it's flipped on its back of the shell. And what do you do?
Oi, turtle. Are you okay, turtle?
All right, you are definitely not a replicant then. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, hi, I'm Noah Saturn. With me today is Kyle Mulford. Welcome back to another episode of We Don't Know What to Watch, the podcast where two guys use the magic of the internet and streaming services to watch movies we haven't seen before. And hopefully we'll find some hidden gems that we've never thought of, thanks to the magic of the internet random button.
Welcome. What wonderful movie did we find today?
Today we watched Ghost in the Shell 2.0, not 1.0. 1.0 came out in like 1995 or 96. 2.0, I believe, was released in 2008.
Yes. I think the original came out in video in 96, so I think it was a 95 movie.
Okay. So this was our first anime. So before we get into this, Kyle, what are your basic thoughts on anime as a general? What's your kind of personal history anime? Because we kind of come from two different spaces of encountering this.
I tried to get into it a little bit when I was in college. I would watch late at night when I was doing homework. I would watch Dragon Ball Z, which is, kind of a cheesier anime, but it's fun to have on in the background. I watched Yu-Gi-Oh, not Yu-Gi-Oh, Inuyasha. Yu-Gi-Oh was on a station I worked at before. I watched Inuyasha, and I actually kind of enjoyed that one. I didn't get too deep into it. I have a lot that someone gave me, but I didn't get into a lot of it other than Cowboy Bebop, which is a fantastic show. And then as far as anime movies, I've got a lot on my bucket list, but I've never seen things like Akira, is how you say it.
Mm-hmm.
Never know how to pronounce that. And including Ghost in the Shell. So this movie was actually on my bucket list of movies, if you will. So of some that I want to see. I enjoy a good anime. I just haven't dove too deep into it.
Okay, now what about stuff like manga or just...
I've never read any manga.
Really? Okay. I thought because you're such a big comics guy. I take that back. I read one or two again back in college, but I actually don't remember what those titles were. Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot that I've not explored in this area, which I wouldn't mind exploring more of.
Mm-hmm.
What about yourself?
Let's see. Most of my knowledge from this sort of thing comes from sort of cultural diffusion, because I was never personally that into it. Because I was not allowed to watch Dragon Ball Z, because around the same time it was on Cartoon Network back in the old Toonami animation block.
Yes.
And I was also not allowed to watch Inuyasha, Naruto, Yu Yu Hakusho. Was
this a violence thing, or was it like...
I think it was mostly violence related. I don't know. I grew up in a box.
Okay, because I was going to say that these that we're mentioning are the ones that were more accessible for Americans, and they're a little tamer than some of the stuff that I have on, like, DVDs and stuff like that. So some of it gets a little...
Interesting.
Like
like Ninja Scroll is a probably earlier one that's famous for its gore and its naked people. And
I was going to say, there's a lot of nudity in anime too. Nudity and violence.
It's not necessarily all designed to be watched for kids, as opposed to a very sort of like a Western-produced Saturday morning cartoon of the same era, like, I don't know, like Batman the Animated Series. Covers some more adult subject matter, but it's still very much designed for a children's audience.
Yeah. Well, and one that's actually really good that I didn't mention, which isn't... I don't know if it's technically anime because it is Western produced, but it's one that a lot of people know, is Avatar: The Last Airbender. And I watched that when it was on. I never saw the second one, which I don't even remember.
The Legend of Korra, I believe.
The Legend of Korra. I never saw that, but Avatar: The Last Airbender is a fantastic series. If you haven't watched it out there.
Yeah, I remember that when that first came out. This would go against talking about the age difference with old man Kyle here. I was like, I want to say like late elementary school, early middle school, and I would watch it with my friends, and we'd kind of pretend to be which benders of air of the four elements you'd want to be. Because it was just kind of one of those scenes where it seemed like everyone, at least my age, was watching that show at the time. At least for like the first season or so, and I kind of got out of it.
It was a Nickelodeon show, so I mean, I'm sure a lot of kids were watching that at the time.
Mm-hmm. After there's either that or SpongeBob, which is still around.
How is that still going?
I don't know. 20 years of SpongeBob, man.
So maybe a little bit of background on Ghost in the Shell 2.0.
Well, before we get into that, I have more to talk about. So
you've got more anime.
We're going to rewind that tape there. But so then, let's see, in high school, while my friends got really into Naruto in particular, it seemed, they would actually like memorize the hand signs for like the different ninja symbols or the jutsus or whatever, because they were that. And then they'd have like fights in the parking lot of this high school. And I just kind of avoided that just out of sheer principle because I thought it was dumb. And then from what I've heard as I've gotten older, Naruto is kind of dumb, and there's a lot more other interesting stuff out there. But then as I'm trying to I've gotten to read more manga and stuff. Like I read the first volume of Pluto, which is really good. That's kind of more of like a detective style series, riffing on some of the older Astro Boy stuff. But then when I was older, I also watched Akira, and I've seen Akira multiple times. I've read the manga of Akira, which is different from the movie, but they're both very excellent and actually made by the same guy. So it's pretty rare that the creator of the manga, Katsuhiro Otomo, also directed the movie. And all I have to say to that movie, it's awesome. And Tetsuo and Kanada, as the names you say over and over again.
All right.
But Akira's probably my favorite. I have dabbled into the some of the Studio Ghibli stuff because who hasn't dabbled? It's the most accessible and probably the most lavishly produced, at least in the U.S.
Yeah, and I have seen a few of those. So was Howl's Moving Castle?
Yes, that's Studio Ghibli.
And then I know that I've seen a couple others.
Spirited Away is probably
Spirited
the
Away
most
I've
famous
seen,
because that one won an Oscar.
So yeah, there's some good stuff out there. Actually, leave a comment below if you are into any sort of anime or something that you've watched that you think we should watch. That not being really especially for me, not being really familiar with anime.
Also, no hentai, please. That's just a personal preference.
Yeah, we can leave that out.
Like, if you're into that sort of thing, that's fine. Good for you. It's just not for me.
But anything else, let us know what your recommendations are.
All right, so now we're back to where we started here with Ghost in the Shell 2.0. Let's talk about some background info about this one. What you got for me, Kyle?
I got that this is based off a 1989 manga called Mobile Armored Riot Police, and it was actually subtitled Ghost in the Shell. And I think there's like 2 or 3 mangas in the original series. This movie was actually a box office failure and only made $10 million. But then later it was released on home video and eventually made a combined $43 million. So it got like a cult following. Mm-hmm. And as you know, like it's right up there with if you mention anime movies, people are going to say Ghost in the Shell or Akira. So this is directed by Mamoru Oshii, and he actually directed the first 2 Ghost in the Shell movies. But before we get into that, in August of 1996, it became the first Japanese film to top the Billboard video sales chart with over 200,000 VHS copies sold. So I thought that was pretty interesting. The first Japanese film to top it was an anime.
That's pretty darn cool, yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. And
Screw you, Seven Samurai.
I know, right?
We have nothing against Seven Samurai. It's a classic.
Kurosawa, what? Who watches that?
Yeah.
You should go watch Kurosawa.
Nobody watched The Hidden Fortress.
Especially not George Lucas.
No, definitely never.
But we watched Ghost in the Shell 2.0, and basically it was the original 1995 movie with updated audio and updated 3D animation. So, and we'll get into that when we go through the movie. But like I said, this director directed the first 2 movies, and the second one came out in 2004. It was called Innocence, and they are both based on the original manga. Then it gets really complicated. In 2002, they had Ghost in the Shell standalone complex series. And then in 2004, they had a second season called SA2 or SAC Second GIG. And then both of those series, both of those seasons were compressed into OVAs, which are original video animations. And
yeah, that's a whole thing.
Yeah, so they were both compressed into a movie called Ghost in the Shell Standalone Complex: The Laughing Man, and Ghost in the Shell Standalone Complex Individual 11. And then later in 2006, that was followed up by a finale film called Ghost in the Shell Standalone Complex Solid State Society. So it's really confusing because they were a series and then they compressed them into a film. So I don't know if you're a Ghost in the Shell fan, like what you prefer. If you watch those series, did they cut stuff out to turn them into a movie? I don't know. That'd be something interesting to go into. But then in 2013, there was another OVA series called Ghost in the Shell Arise. And there were 4 of them that had a limited theatrical release that were later released as a 10 episode. So they took these 4 movies and later released them as a 10 episode television series called Arise Alternative Architecture. And this was set before the original manga, so I think it's just original storyline. And then a 5th one came out called Pyrophoric Cult, and which was the final 2 episodes of the 10 episode series. And then in 2015, there's a movie called Ghost in the Shell, the new movie, that tied up loose ends from the Pyrophoric Cult arc. So there is a lot of Ghost in the Shell.
There is a lot.
And I don't know how it all ties together, but this director only did the first 2 movies, and they are the only ones, it seems, that are based on the original manga. And then one last thing is that in December 2018, apparently Netflix acquired the worldwide streaming rights to a new series called Ghost in the Shell SAC 2045, which
SVU.
SVU, CSI,
SUV, Vegas,
which will premiere in 2020. So that's a little history of all of this. And the 2.0 came out in conjunction with another anime movie coming out in 2008. So they touched it up and gave it new 3D animation and everything. So
okay, so this is closer to like a special edition or a director's cut than, say, a sequel. I know when I was watching, we were talking about a little bit before we started recording, it reminded me of something like the Star Wars special editions, or like when Star Wars was released on Blu-ray. They touched a few things up, changed a few things here and there, and I guess that Chewie shot first or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I think so. I think if I read it correctly, they didn't really change a lot. They might have cut a couple things. I think they changed the opening title sequence. And then, like I said, they updated the 3D animation on some of it, but then some of the movie is still the original 2D cell animation, which also actually they did use a combination of cell and computer-generated graphics for the original in 95 too. So, and actually, I'll get into that right now. I didn't like the 3D animation.
Not a fan?
No, they were updating it, but I felt that the stuff that seemed like it was original animation looked so much better than the 3D stuff. The 3D stuff looked, I don't even know how to describe it. It was the textures were too smooth and just kind of, I don't know. It felt unfinished to me.
Yeah, it's fair enough. It almost had sort of like a I'm going to say video game cutscene.
Yeah.
So like, oh, I'm playing the newest Metal Gear, and then they got this cinematic or something before I can get back to playing the game.
And, unfortunately, they did this in 2008, and I think it was either I don't know where they were at with technology by then, but I don't think it was good enough that they should have been doing this. Well, nowadays, they could probably make it look pretty sharp.
Well, also, remember, this is a matter of budget, too, because in 2007, Ratatouille came out. But the thing is, Pixar has that Disney money.
Yes.
So they can spend much more time on this, and plus they've got their whole RenderMan software, which is just insane, and like this giant server farm where it takes like 24 hours to like render one frame of it or something. It's some pretty crazy stuff going on over at Pixar.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a little background
I
on
think it's probably
this.
more of imaginative, like sort of technology that they had on hand and probably budget.
Yeah, I bet. So, but I mean, they tried to touch it up. They tried to re-release it. I mean, it's nothing wrong with it. It almost makes me now want to go back and watch the original that I haven't watched and see what I think of that, or if the stuff that they left in there they still touched up and color graded and everything. So I don't know. I'm very interested now to go back and watch the original.
Whether there's some like restoration efforts, kind of like you'd see with some older movies.
So should we get into this?
And I did note, because I actually got this, I watched this film on Blu-ray from the local library, because, support your local library. You check out your local libraries more, kids, because they've got a lot more stuff than you might think. They keep up with the times. Libraries are great. Support them.
And especially if you live in a city, a bigger town or a bigger city, your local library is not just books, but movies. You're going to find a lot.
They also have a lot of comics and manga and just all kinds of different things, too. Library services are great. Go to your local library. I think they're an important community hub, but that's just me. And on this particular Blu-ray release, they also had just the original version of the film on it as well.
Oh, okay.
So maybe if you can find it on Blu-ray or find it at your local library, you can watch both versions in the comfort of your own home when you're naked or something. I don't know.
And
Kyle, isn't that how you watch all these movies, naked?
Every movie.
Every movie? Even in the theater?
Even in the theater.
He buys out entire theaters just so he could be naked.
I don't have to buy out the theater because no one will sit next to me.
Exactly. It's perfect.
It's a deterrent. I do want to mention that our show is, if you know the premise of the show, we spin a wheel, or, a hypothetical wheel, and it's keyed to our streaming services that we have, and we use a site called Real Good. And when we spun for this one, it came up and said that this was on Tubi TV. So all of the movies that we do for our show are on a service that we have when we do the show. Whether they stay on there or not, I don't know. But this time I think it might be the first time that it told us it was on a service that it wasn't on. So just to let you know, because usually we let you know at the end of the show which streaming service you can watch this on. You rented it from the library. I actually rented it from Amazon Prime. So it is actually not on any of the streaming services that we generally use on our show.
At least as of this recording.
As of the recording, yes. So just a disclaimer there for anybody who watches or listens to the show and is wondering where to stream it. So what's your snowball pitch there, sir?
Well, it's a near future, very much kind of cyberpunk future, where sort of like a super cop who's got a robot body and a human brain goes around doing stuff and then tries to think about her lot in life and what does it really mean to be human?
Is she human? Is she not human?
Is she just? And the term ghost in the shell, because a ghost would be your consciousness or your soul, and the shell would be sort of your robot cyborg body.
So there you go. Now you know the movie. Ghost in the Shell is a consciousness in your body.
And that is all. Like, is your consciousness separate from your body? That sort of thing.
It's a lot of philosophical musings.
Yep, and she has seen things that no one else has seen. And when she dies, it'll all go away like tears in the rain.
And tears in the rain. Wait, was that this movie?
I think that was Blade Runner, but, nothing exists in a vacuum. So I just have to be sure that Blade Runner influenced this movie in some way, shape, or form.
Yes, just as this movie influenced others. But we'll get to that when we get to our recommendations, I'm sure. Because this movie not only took influence, but gave a lot of influence.
Oh, yeah.
So we start off seeing, what's her name? I didn't even write it down.
Kusanagi. Major Kusanagi. Or we could just call her the Major.
Major. We'll call her Major. And I think that's actually what they usually reference her when you're reading about the show and the manga and stuff. She's overlooking the city, and then she gets naked. And And that's the opening of the movie.
Yeah, there's a lot of nudity in this movie, so don't watch it with your young children or around your boss or anything.
And it's weird because she's a robot body, but like it's drawn realistically, except there's no nether region parts. So she's kind of like a Barbie doll.
Yeah, I guess that's a good way of putting it. So yeah, it's there's nudity, but it's very non-sexual nudity. She just happens to be like get naked, so then she can jump off a building and turn invisible.
Yes, she's got invisibility powers.
Yeah.
Thanks
to her fiance Reed Richards, who got them attacked by cosmic rays and
Mrs.
Susan Storm Richards.
Susan Storm Richards. So there's a raid going on, and this is where I watched this movie twice this week, and some of the actual plot gets kind of convoluted. There are different sections of the city. Was it like New Jack City or something? With
because this is based off of, this is supposed to be a version of Hong Kong, and if you look at Hong Kong, pictures of Hong Kong, especially pictures of downtown Tokyo in like the 1980s or the 1990s, it looks a lot like this.
Actually, that was one thing I read, is he actually used actual streets from Hong Kong. Mm-hmm. So I think there may even be buildings and streets that are buildings and streets in Hong Kong. But no, it's not New Jack City. I know that's a different movie. I'm well aware. But now I have lost what the movie was, or what the town is, or city is called.
It's not New Donk City?
No. But there's a raid going on, and there's different sections of the city, and Major is in the Section 9, and they have like this police force there where you find out that she actually has a full robotic body and a robotic brain. So she's almost...
a human brain, I guess.
I think they put in a human consciousness into a synthetic brain.
A lot of it is left sort of kind of vague because this movie does not have a very long runtime. It's under 90 minutes and still has a lot of ground to cover.
Yeah. But I was under the impression when she was talking to one of the other characters, because they even talked about it in some of the dialogue, she says that like the whole police force, she's like, I'm full on robot with a human consciousness, and her partner is just got like cyborg eyes and, other, just little features that he's had upgraded. And they said there's like only 2 people on the police force that are 100% human. So we're living in a future here where kind of cybernetics are becoming the new norm.
Cybernetic implants, I'm sure, like robo-arm, robo-leg.
You see one later, his fingers all like come all wiry out so he can type on like a keyboard all over the place. It's kind
of one of the iconic moments from the movie that everyone remembers.
Yeah.
Which was actually taken directly from the manga.
So there's a raid going on, and she drops down from the building. They were going to just take the guy in because he's looking for asylum or something like that. And she jumps down.
Political corporate intrigue that's very common for these type of things. Think something like Neuromancer, which was the first big cyberpunk novel by William Gibson, which I'm sure influenced this guy. And I believe Matsushi something Showu, the manga artist whose name I can't remember off the top of my head as well.
We should have written that down, huh?
I watched a video about it. It was pretty good. Gave me a lot of information, but I didn't write it down because I'm a dummy.
They're going to take him in, and she jumps off the building because she's in contact with her group. And she jumps off the building and shoots the guy in the head through the window, and then jumps.
He explodes.
And he he explodes. That must have been one powerful bullet, because his whole upper torso and head and arms all just whoosh, just a spray of blood.
Yep.
Blood everywhere, blood.
Violence.
And then she jumps down, and they look out the window, and the guy's like, look at those thermoptics. And she's like turning invisible, and she waves her hand in front of her face, kind of like a magician. She's like, like the magic fingers.
Yes.
And then we cut to the opening credits, and that's basically just showing her being made, like her robot body.
She's going in for maintenance, doing a thing. This is kind of all the cool features and graphics and orange golden hour type sun.
And there's this weird song going along with it, with like this high pitched singing, and apparently it's in an ancient Japanese language.
That's cool.
Yeah, so I thought that was interesting. So then after the opening credits, we find out there's this ghost hacker out there somewhere, and they're tracing it through calls, because there's apparently like a hacker trying to infiltrate this other city.
He's like this diplomat or someone who's in town for like these secret political meetings.
Yeah.
And he's already sort of is trying to hack his way into like sort of this political aide who's like the major is almost all robot.
Yeah, and they trace it to these phone calls that are coming through. And then we cut to these trash collectors, and one guy is hacking his wife's brain.
He's trying to hack into like his records so he can like see a picture of his kid, because he's divorced and he wants to get back together with his wife and his kid. And he's kind of doing his thing, just an average man on the street, hacking these phone booths in this super future where the internet clearly exists. So that's kind of one of the weird parts, is especially from things of this era, is like some things they get right, like the internet and everyone being connected, having to access information, send each other information really fast at the touch of a button, is like that we can do that now. Like I can send a picture to Kyle without even thinking about it. But then at the same time, there's no cell phones. And reportedly William Gibson in Neuromancer, there's a scene in Neuromancer where this sort of detective type character has to run from phone booth to phone booth. And then supposedly I've heard that William Gibson is still kicking himself for not thinking about cell phones.
Well, maybe. You would think that they would come up with that too, since they had like those telecommunicators in Star Trek and stuff, So, I mean, those were kind of walkie-talkie-ish, but
it's interesting.
Yeah,
it's weird.
But there is a little detail that I noticed when the trash collector is hacking his wife, and then he's talking to his partner about it, who doesn't care. So his partner's sitting there with his eyes closed, like, yeah, drive on to the next thing. And the guy's like, oh, I've got a picture of my kid right here. And he goes to show it to the guy. And the guy never has his eyes open because he's like, I don't want to look at your picure. I don't care about your kid.
We'll come back to that later.
But that was a detail that the first time I was like, oh, did they go over that? And watching the second time, I was like, oh, they paid attention to that detail.
Mm-hmm.
So then we've got Major and Batu and
Sato.
Yeah, and then the third guy.
So we've got guy. I think that's Sato.
No, that's Batu.
Okay.
And then the third guy, who
he is just a baseline human.
And he doesn't even like using like automatic weapons. It's like it's a thing with him. Like he uses like an old revolver or whatever, and they're yelling at him for, it's like, that weapon's gonna get jammed. Use this one, and which is kind of ironic because you would think like the automatic weapons would jam more.
It's weird. There are some future weapons. I know there are pistols out there where it's instead of like a mechanical trigger, it's an electronic trigger where it just like sends like an electrical pulse into the gun and shoots a bullet out. There's some pretty interesting stuff out there. And instead of like mechanical stuff, it's just a battery. It's called like Metal Storm or Bullet Storm. No, Bullet Storm is a video game. It's Metal Storm. I don't know. There's some interesting stuff to look up there.
Oh, cool.
So I'd buy it. I'm sure they've come up with something at this point.
Yeah. I mean, with all the other technology, they've created robots that have consciousness and everything. So
and then they also have robots that can turn into cars.
And they're robots in disguise.
Exactly.
So they're chasing after. They trace it to a call, and then they see that. And then they just missed the trash collectors, and the guy runs out in the street. Is like, "Wait a minute! You forgot my trash."
Yeah, it's like one. There aren't a lot of jokes in this movie, but that was kind of one funny part.
It almost sounded like Don Knotts.
Yeah.
That was the other thing, is the copy that I rented was the English dub version. And I'm assuming that, and actually I'm reading the IMDb, they're listed. There's a Japanese voiceover and in English. But I usually tend to go for the actual original dubs and just watch read the subtitles. But I didn't really have that option. I rented it on Amazon and they gave me the English dub. So
also, sometimes it can be kind of hard, especially when you're watching something for the first time, to take notes.
Yeah,
when it's subtitled. But sub versus dub, we're not going to get into it.
No, so
I have no opinion on it. Some people do. It's like GIF. It's fine either way you do it. It's pronounced GIF.
Like the peanut butter?
Like the peanut butter.
But anyway, I watched the English dub version, and the guy sounded like Don Knotts.
Fair enough.
But they see, and then he says, "Has anybody used this phone recently?" He's like, "Yeah, the trash collector just did." and so they chase after the trash collector, and then the trash collector was telling his partner, he's like, "Well, I had this sob story in the bar, and this nice guy must have overheard my sob story, and he gave me a way to hack my wife's brain. He's such a sweet man. Yeah. I got to go warn him that the cops are after us." They found out that he's giving hacks.
We get a chase scene.
And then we get a cool chase scene because they're chasing after the trash man, and then they realize that he's warning the other guy who's the real hacker, or the real hacker. And then can you see those air quotes in an audio format? In an audio format. And so then they chase after him, and he's got a coat on that's got a cloaking device on it. And so he's running around all cloaked and
running through like this busy marketplace and this busy kind of street and farmer's market type of thing. It's a really cool scene.
But before very that, well animated. Like, he shoots the tire out of the trash can or the trash truck and garbage truck. I'm at a loss for words. Someone threw my vocabulary in the garbage truck. But the garbage truck tips, and he starts shooting it with this little handgun, and it's putting like huge dents into a giant truck. And
finally, he's using like these super rounds or something that we
finally blows it up.
Because this is a movie, and that's why it blows it up.
Then they have the scene that you most know from the one that we didn't mention in the history of Ghost in the Shell.
We didn't have to talk about that one. The box office certainly didn't.
She should just stick to Black Widow.
Yes.
but the scene where she's fighting in the water and she's like all camouflage herself. So he's eventually lost his cloak and he's fighting some invisible woman in this giant shallow water pond thing.
Of course, we know it's the Major because we've seen her do this thing before, and there's this scene where he's kind of running from alley to alley, and he decides to chase after her, so then she's kind of slowly ripping off her clothes to get in so she can camouflage in her robot suit.
And I thought the fight was kind of cool because you see like him getting beat up and not seeing her, and then his arm comes up and you just see it like just in midair just twist and break, and then his leg does, and then somehow he still does a bunch of cartwheels across the water, one-handed and one-legged.
I'm pretty sure he's had some enhancements too.
He had the gymnastic enhancements.
Yeah.
He's a super gymnast. And so they're fighting on the water, and
his gun jams because, your gun's gonna more likely jam when you're firing these crazy big bullets out of a tiny gun.
Yeah, and they even mention that later. It's like, yeah, he was using the wrong bullets in that thing. Funny how that jammed, right, mister? And so they take him in, and they find out that he wasn't even the real hacker.
Yep.
He was hacked into himself, and they go to the trash man's apartment, and they find out he was hacked into it. He doesn't even have...
This scene with the garbage man is probably... Sort of the interrogation scene with the garbage man is, I think, probably one of the most interesting ideas that's kind of presented. Because we find out that this guy, the puppet master, can hack humans' brains, because as far as we know, this guy's just a regular human, and sort of implant these simulated memories, so he thinks he has a wife and a kid, but then when we actually finally see the photo that he talks about, it's just him and his dog. It's like, no, I've had this apartment, I've moved out for my wife and kid, we're going to get back together. It's like, no, sir, you've lived in this apartment for 6 years. But unfortunately, we don't have the technology at the moment to find a way and restore your original memories. So this guy has basically nothing. And that is horrifying.
That is. It's a terrible scenario. And speaking of the picture, I noticed that he had the dog in the picture. And then there was and these are all the same kind of dog. And I was noticed this the second time I watched the movie. There's some commercial when they're walking past a TV with the dog in there. And then she's on like this boat that goes under a bridge on this montage sequence. And then they cut up to the top of the bridge and there's a person and the dog looking over the bridge. And I had to look up because I'm going, is there a significance to the dog? And all I could find was, there's no significance. The director just really likes basset hounds.
Fair enough. I mean,
because I'm sitting there seeing these basset hounds everywhere. I'm going,
is the basset hound the hacker?
Is this some sort of weird clue to the who the hacker is? Or like, did he escape in a dog? Is it kind of like the end of Fallen, where Denzel Washington thinks he can only go from person to person, and then he ends up in an animal. Did you ever see that movie?
What? No.
There was a killer who could like hop between people or something like that. So like he gets him trapped out in the woods, and at the very end of the movie, he gets rid of this person, and he thinks, oh, he's got nowhere else to go. And then you find out it's like he jumped into an animal or something and goes off into the woods.
That doesn't sound like a great movie.
No, that's about all I remember of the movie.
Must have really stuck with you, huh?
It really did. Just the ending. But no, the director just really likes that dog.
Fair enough. And
I think it was a basset hound or a corgi or something.
It's a basset hound.
Okay, yeah, it was a basset hound.
The corgi is the dog in Cowboy Bebop.
That's what I was thinking of, since I had manga and anime on the brain. Oh, hi, Simba Wilson. Sorry, my cat is jumping on the couch.
It's a studio cat.
A studio cat. He's trying to find a place to sit with us.
What do you have? Do you have any thoughts about this, Simba?
Nope.
Thanks. But anyway, and one thing we haven't talked about yet, but this film has scenes of people sort of like they've got these holes in the back of their neck so they can sort of connect to the internet so they can jack in, jack out, jack off. I don't know.
I was wondering if we were going there.
I shouldn't. I really shouldn't. I apologize.
This is a family podcast, God damn it.
But yeah, so this is very much... this is kind of the first time you see, at least I think, that you can see them jacking into the internet. Then you can kind of see what they're seeing from the internet, going from like security camera here or there, surveillance stuff. Kind of like someone could very easily do, like, I don't know, like the NSA or something.
Yeah. The other thing that I noticed too is that they kind of telepathically talk to each other, which I don't know if is some sort of Wi-Fi thing or something, because, when they're not jacked into anything, they can still just kind of telepathically talk to each other. And so, you just see them on screen, just not moving their face or mouth or anything, and talking to someone who's on the other side of the city. So again, I don't know if that's a Wi-Fi thing.
Probably.
That's just what I assume.
Maybe they established a psychic rapport or something so they can always talk to each other.
Well, and then when she like jacked into the car, she, the cords come into her neck and she takes over the car, and she's got like a map going on in her head. So like she's driving the car while looking at the map. She's very good at multitasking.
Does that count as distracted driving though?
I think it might. But she drove pretty good.
Yeah.
So after all that chase and everything, they find out that both of those people were being hacked. They go on to what my notes just say, exposition on a boat, because she is like scuba diving, and he's like, aren't you worried about like sinking like a rock because you're a robot? And she's talking about all this stuff about whether,
what does it mean? Am I really human, or am I just a ghost? Has my ghost been copied? How much of me? What really makes me me? And
we're not really certain. I don't even know if we're really certain at the end whether she has a actual human consciousness that was taken from a human and then put into a new body, or if hers was created.
Yeah.
And that's a question that I'm not sure was entirely answered.
Yeah, I mean, is Rick Deckard a replicant?
I don't know. It depends on which version of the movie you watch.
Does the unicorn mean anything?
I don't think. Does the top fall?
Was he inherit? Was Bruce Willis dead the whole time? Is Die Hard a Christmas movie?
One will never know.
How many licks does it take to get to the center of a Tootsie Pop?
A 1, a 2. We never found out the answer to that because he always chomps on 3 and then just says 3.
I came across, I think it was like in an Uncle John's bathroom reader that
My grandparents always used to have those in the bathroom. I loved them.
some college students would like, apparently there was a few college students where they like created sort of like a more scientific test where they had people lick and kind of count the many licks. Then there's another group where they made sort of like this artificial tongue. And they had it lick a bunch of different... They came up to like 400 something. Stuff you find out when you're reading like in your grandparents' bathroom.
Yeah. My grandparents had one or two Uncle John's bathroom readers, and then like those condensed Reader's Digest books.
Oh, yeah.
So I'd like read jokes and like stories out of there in the bathroom. That's probably just too much information. Talking about going to the restroom. Where were we?
We were on the scuba diving scene where she talks about how much of me is me, because I'm so much of a robot. How much of me is still human? Sort of a nice kind of quiet scene after an action scene to really. The film has good pacing.
It does, and that was a funny thing that I found was because reading up on it, apparently the studio didn't like that he had too little action in it and too much exposition, but he kind of fought for that because it's like, well, this is more about, the philosophical side of things. So yeah, we'll put action in here to appease that. But then, we need this other stuff in here too, because that's what this whole story is about. I don't think it's really about the political stuff. It's more about the actual thoughts on what is human.
That's kind of where the Blade Runner comparison can come into again, because Blade Runner is a relatively quiet movie, punctuated with some memorable action scenes, as opposed to something like The Avengers, which is an action movie through and through.
Yes. And actually, if you like Blade Runner and you can get through that movie, which I do, then you'll definitely be able to get through this because it's shorter and has a lot more action than Blade Runner.
But does it have sad Harrison Ford?
No, it doesn't.
It has sad Major Kusanagi instead.
Yes. Am I real? Am I a real boy?
Yes.
Am I a real girl?
And then she finds that out when she goes to save her dad in the belly of a whale.
The blue fairy comes and makes her a real girl. The end.
Yep. With the help of her friend Teddy, who's a little cute robot teddy bear.
Teddy Ruxpin. And then since we had a little bit of exposition on the boat, we need to get into more nudity. So then we cut to some naked blonde on the road that gets hit by a truck. And so that gets taken in by Section 9.
Mm-hmm.
And then some people from Section 6 come in, and they find out that this was another robot body, and they find out that this body was made by Megatech, which is also the company that made the Major's body. So
Megatech is one of these kind of super corporations, because that's kind of what goes on, and especially in these kind of cyberpunky type futures like Alchemax or something.
Yeah, or the OCP or
Roxxon or.
But anyway, they you find out Oscorp.
Wayne Enterprises.
They own everything. Luther Incorporated.
Yeah, does he have a company brand?
I don't know if he does.
It kind of depends on the interpretation. Sometimes.
Well, a lot of the time it's called Luther Corp.
Okay.
So, but you find out that Section 6 actually created this body because they find out it has like no identification numbers or anything. It was just a body that was created by them, but didn't have like any of the...
Who authorized? There's no serial numbers on it, sort of.
So you find out that Section 6 was working with Megatech to make a body that the Puppet Master, which we never mentioned that's
hacker, the name of this ghost hatcher that they've been tracking the whole movie, is called the Puppet Master.
So they tricked him into coming into this body, and then you find out that like he wakes up, they think they have the body shut down, but then he wakes up and says, "No, I wanted to get into this." He wakes
up and goes into. I'm not going to see. So it goes into a monologue. Not full villain monologue, but
no, but it was another kind of "Am I human?" thing, because he actually says that he was created on the internet. He wasn't a human consciousness. He was created from scratch, but he gained sentience. And so he's like, I'm a sentient being and I want diplomatic immunity. Diplomatic immunity.
Thank you, Lethal Weapon 2.
Can anybody say that without saying diplomatic immunity?
Fair enough. Anyway, so yeah,
because he's like, I'm a real boy, even though I was created on the internet.
I'm an AI, but I gained sentience when I came in contact with all the information in the internet. Almost like the Age of Ultron and Avengers Age of Ultron, where he's kind of an AI, then he looks at the internet for 5 minutes and says, "This is terrible. I gotta destroy everything."
Hey, no
Fair
strings
enough.
on me.
Yeah, and Tony Stark is Stromboli.
Yes. And he says, I wanted to get into this because I want to have a body that will die. Like, he doesn't, I don't think he wants to live forever. So he's trying to get into a body that will make him a person so that he is a person who will eventually die.
Because he's like, I've done everything. Now the only thing I have left to experience is death.
And this is where it comes into all of the other plot stuff, where you find out that like Section 6 came in with 2 cloaked figures who steal the body out of there because they actually created the puppet master. They've been chasing the puppet master saying, he's trying to infiltrate and like assassinate people. Well, you find out that they actually created the puppet master in order to get into places and infiltrate places, and they don't want that leaked out. So that's why they're trying to stop everything in this movie. Is Section 6 actually created the bad guy they're chasing.
Yep, Section 6 versus Section 9, and there are strange occurrences at the Circle K.
Like 2 cloaked figures.
Yes.
Which the human...
Oh, yeah? Are you really me from the future? What number am I thinking of?
The 2 cloaked figures steal the puppet master,
and then, Kusanagi also has personal reasons. He's like, yeah, something about this guy doesn't sit with me. He says he's like, obsessed with me or something. I gotta go to deep dive into this guy's consciousness because I've been in my robot body so long. I think I can handle it, but I gotta know what's going on inside this guy's head. This is really kind of freaking me out, bro.
Yeah. And she also indicates that I think that he's been, how he can hack people and robots and whatever. She keeps saying, and it's never clarified, but it's implied, that he's kind of put thoughts into her head too, because she keeps saying like, he's going to be here or whatever. And she's like, when they're chasing and then they split into 2 cars, and that's on this chase. She tells her partner, I'm going after that car. And he's like, is it one of those feelings in your ghost again? And, so she gets these weird feelings. And I think that like there's some sort of connection that he's been in her brain without her knowing it. So she ends up with this connection to him, whether he intended that or not. So they're chasing after them. And then finally they split up and she follows the right car, and then she has to fight this giant tank thing. It's like a 4-legged
kind of
tank.
the spider tank, sort of thing. 4-legged tank, and this is sort of as we're approaching the climax. Because it's like, all right, so she found out where it's going. And it's in this kind of cool warehouse type empty building thing, and then she realized like, all right, we found the car. He's in the back of the car, and the thing between this is this tank, and all I have is basically like some small explosives and like an assault rifle. But she has to know. She's got to go what's in this tank. And we get a really cool fight scene, a very memorable fight scene.
Yeah, there's a lot of gunfire, and she's a a robot, but a person going up against a tank. So that's pretty cool. And she goes up and actually starts to try and rip the top off the thing.
Because she's just so obsessed with getting to know this thing.
And she can't even get into it. She rips so hard that like her arms rip right off of her body.
Yeah, like her body is starting to fall apart because she's just so obsessed. So even like to the point where she doesn't even care if her cyborg body survives because she can always get another one.
Yeah, and then finally she gets back up in there, and they're they do get the actual hacker out, and they're both
they kill the tank. Everything's okay.
They're both laying on the ground with no arms and legs, and just like, basically torso and head.
Are you sure you want to do this? Yeah, let me in. All right, I'm gonna monitor you from this side, just so.
Yeah, and so then her and the hacker talk like telepathically, so no one else can hear them, and
then while her partner, the eye guy, Batu, Klaatu, Vrata,
yes.
I know your stinking words.
But yeah, he's on the lookout. Eye guy.
So what's kind of fun is that when this AI starts talking, he starts using like the Major's body, and the Major is using his body, sort of talk to each other. And then like the Puppet Master cuts the audio, and that's sort of when we get this big philosophical conversation between the two of them. It's like, all right, Major, I like you. I think you're very unique for some reason. And I want to merge with you. It's like, well, why do you need to merge with me? Why can't you make copies?
Yeah. So I don't know if there's an answer to that, is there?
Well, he says in the scene, because a copy is a perfect circle. So like if say someone comes up with a virus that gets rid of this program, all the copies of the program will all be taken down the exact same way.
That's true.
Well, when humans reproduce, every code is different and things mutate over time. So that way you could essentially not be able to all taken out by the same flaws over and over again. So in addition to sort of enhancing his own survival, it's like, no, because he's kind of like the closest thing he can have, I guess, to real reproduction. So they want to merge, create something that's not quite the Puppet Master and not quite the Major Kusanagi, kind of something in between.
Yeah, and then this is the point where Section 6 gets there, and they're like,
coming in with their helicopters.
They're still like, I don't want people to know that we created Project 2501, which is what the Puppet Master
That's his
ultimately
real name,
is.
yeah.
And so they go in to snipe both the Major and the Puppet Master and shoot them, like they shoot his head to blow up the brain, and then they're going for her head, and Batu like gets in the way, and then we cut to he saved the head so that her brain was still intact, but the two were still merged. So then he attaches the head onto like a girl's body. Because
so he finds a new body. So he goes to one of his safe houses that he keeps around from Section 9. And the best thing he could find, all right, this is kind of the best thing I could find. And it's like this little, like a 12-year-old body, or like a little girl.
Yeah, he found it in like a black marker or something like that. So, and then he's like, well, he's at his safe house, and he's like, you can stay here or whatever. And she's like, I gotta leave. And then she says, I'm not the Major and I'm not the Puppet Master. I'm something new.
So now we know that they have chosen to merge.
Yes. So we've got a new person robot.
And this new person, the new Major, walks outside, goes to see, and they say something like, the net is a vast place. Over a beautiful shot of the city, and that's the end of the movie.
Now we got the Major Puppet Master.
Yes. Puppet Major Master.
Puppet Master, Major. Yes. Major Master, Major Master Puppet?
I don't know.
And yeah, so now she will go to conquer the world.
Yes. Take over the world. And
take over the world.
Don't feed the plant. I don't know.
Come, Pinky. We shall conquer the world. Take over the world.
Going to do what we do every night, Pinky. What's that, Brain? Try to take over the world. It's Pinky and the Brain. Pinky and the Brain. One's an evil scientist, the other one's insane.
Oh, I love that show. So, what are your thoughts on the movie?
This is actually, I think, my third time seeing it. It's the first time I've seen the 2.0 version. I watched the 1.0 version twice. One like maybe 4 or 5 years ago, then like a couple years back. And then, so then I saw it this time. So I'm a little more familiar with the plot. So I'm able to, I guess, pick up more than you said you had to watch it twice just in a short amount of time. Because this movie is very thematically dense.
And luckily, I will say that some of the dense stuff, you don't have to get to enjoy this movie.
It's still gorgeous.
It still really is gorgeous to look at. And it's also, like I said, it's mostly about the philosophical stuff. And that's why I enjoyed the movie mostly. And the philosophical stuff and some of the action, the immunity stuff and the who created what, like that seemed like subplot to me.
Mm-hmm. It's almost all set dressing for the basic idea of what it means to be human, and can you still be fully human while also being, a human in a robot body.
Yes.
Like Robot Man from Doom Patrol.
Yes. Played by Brendan Fraser right now.
That's true.
Have you watched that? I do not have DC Universe.
I do, and I haven't watched it because I'm a bum.
Okay.
I've heard very good things.
So overall, I really enjoyed the movie. This was my first and second time watching it. And ironically, like I said, this is 2.0, so it's supposed to be improved, but I would like to go back and watch the original because I liked the 2D animation better than the 3D CGI that they added to this one.
It didn't look terrible, but it did kind of stick out a little bit.
It did. It was very jarring, actually. If they would have updated all of it, maybe I wouldn't have really noticed. But then when they go back to this great 2D cell animation, after the 3D stuff, I was like, why did you need to update that when it looks so nice? I mean, like I said, maybe they updated that too. Maybe they color corrected. Maybe they shined it up a little.
Yeah, did some kind of restoration.
But if they did do that, then they should have just done that through the whole movie and just kind of fixed it up instead of altering it into this 3D look. But that's just my opinion. I'm a fan of good CGI, but if it's not like super CGI, then I want classic animation.
And the thing about CGI and just computer animation in general, there are ways to make it look good without breaking the budget.
Yeah.
When you go with like the super stylized cell animation on stuff like Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker, it looks great. And with HD upgrade, it still looks amazing. It's very stylized, but it still looks awesome. And then another more recent example would be something like Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse did not have a Pixar-level budget, but dear Lord, that is a gorgeous film in every which way, shape, or form.
Yes. Speaking of which, we bought that one. I'm going to have to watch it again.
My name is Peter Porker. I was bitten by a radioactive pig. I love Spider-Man.
Why is his cloak blowing in the wind? We're in the basement. So overall, would you give this a recommend?
I think so, because, I mean, one thing we haven't talked about, one of the big elephants in the room, is this film, its influence. We should take a moment to think about that, especially with something like, I don't know, jacking into a computer program, jacking out to a computer program.
Oh, maybe The Matrix?
I mean, the Wachowskis are known for being very big anime fans.
And actually...
I mean, they made Speed Racer.
Their pitch was that they took Ghost in the Shell movie into the producers they were pitching to and set it down and said, we want to make this only for real. So that's the kind of influence it had on there. They literally used Ghost in the Shell and said, I want to do this only for real. So there was a huge influence on The Matrix. They didn't use a lot of it, but it was a big influence on
they took
what they did.
Visual cues on some of the visual languages used,
and some of the ideas a little bit, but I know that they took ideas from other things too, and I'm not sure. I haven't read up on all of like what they've what they used.
Hong Kong action movies, probably for sure.
Yeah. Well, and there's different philosophies and stuff that different philosophers that they've used too.
Yep. I think the Wachowskis are fascinating filmmakers. They may not always have incredible stories to go with them, but say what you want, Jupiter Ascending is gorgeous to look at least for that alone, it's a very pretty movie. It's a gorgeous movie. It almost feels like an anime.
It is, but that movie is bonkers.
And in some of the best sort of way. Eddie Redmayne is my favorite part of that entire movie. Because when that movie came out in theaters, that was like a month after he had won an Oscar.
Yes.
So it was like he was trying really, really hard. It was like, all right, guys, I won this Oscar. Will they take it away from me? Huh?
And everybody wanted it taken away after this performance. And which, because the internet's hyperbolic about everything. It's like, because he acted bad in this doesn't mean he acted bad in the other movie.
Yeah, I still think that Michael Keaton should have won, but that's just me.
Yeah, but that's neither here nor there. Big influence on The Matrix.
And its sequels and The Matrix influenced everything else. So by the time we got the whitewashing version, I don't know, but the
Ghost in the Shell
3.0,
Scarlett Johansson,
ScarJo,
ScarJo.0,
Ghost in the ScarJo.
Yeah, I've seen that, and why I don't know why I watched that before I ever watched the original anime.
But it's kind of a situation where, like, it's been ripped off so many times, by the time you actually see this kind of straight adaptation of it, it doesn't feel fresh as all the things that's kind of ripped off of it.
Yeah. And the thing is, though, with this one, this really did feel fresh to me. I really enjoyed it. And I would give it a pretty high recommend. So, I mean, especially if you are trying to get into anime, this is accessible. And I think it goes a little deeper than a lot of the stuff that most people over here watch as far as anime goes. But it's just as accessible as that stuff, but it's a little more tended towards what real anime,
Rid of more substance than, say, just... It's kind of like a well-prepared meal at a nice restaurant as opposed to like a fast food burger.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that if you like something like Attack on Titan, I know, which is popular, Naruto, or
because I'm not going to be a snob. Like I said, I liked Inuyasha. I think that's pretty anime light. I had fun watching Dragon Ball Z.
I liked Sailor Moon when I was watching it as a little kid.
Yeah, and that's all anime light, and there's nothing wrong with that.
There's absolutely nothing wrong with that.
There's going to be a lot of purists who go, that's not real anime, but like, you know what? If you enjoy it, you enjoy it.
That's fine.
So, but there is really good quality stuff like this too that, you know, you should seek out. So,
get a chance, take a moment to watch it. So I would definitely recommend this film.
Like I said, especially if you're interested in diving into anime, this would be a good one to go to. So we've talked about influences. What about recommendations? And I'm going to say one thing, like from our past episodes here with recommendations, I've noticed, and I'm going to just embrace this, that you kind of bring class to the recommendations. And
you bring trash.
I bring trash, and so I'm going to embrace the fact that you know, we're bringing Kyle's cult and schlock to it's Kyle's cult and schlock corner when it comes to recommendations.
I think that's just because, you know, we grew up, like, I grew up where, like, one of the TV channels that my parents always let me watch no matter what was Turner Classic Movies, so I would watch that a lot, and I still do, because they have got a lot of great stuff on there.
I watched late night HBO, TBS, and TNT.
I didn't have HBO, and I'm probably glad I didn't.
Yeah, so
You had Skinamax, didn't you?
No. Unfortunately, no. When you're a young boy growing up, you always wanted
with
Skinamax.
Hormones.
Yeah, you always wanted Skinamax. We had HBO, which, you know, sometimes showed some fun stuff late at night.
Oh boy,
but we won't go into those shows. But I did have HBO, so like I watched a lot of movies off of there, and you know, nowadays they show a lot of good stuff, but like back then, you know,
sometimes you just gotta fill airtime.
Yeah, you fill it, and there was a lot more movies then, so they had to fill with a lot of movies because they didn't have the shows that they have nowadays. So it was practically 24 hours of movies then. Like
at one point, I know AMC was kind of the same way, which was supposed to be like American movie classics or something.
Yeah, and which AMC and TCM didn't come around for a little while after.
TCM is actually, AMC was there first. TCM wasn't around till 1994.
Yeah. And that would have been in high school for me, and I don't know if we even had that channel.
Yeah, and the only reason I know this is because once I watch a lot of TCM. Came in 1994, and it was their big difference is that they decided they're not going to show commercials.
Yeah.
Which they do not to this day, and I definitely approve of that. HBO does also not show commercials.
And as far as like the kind of movies they showed, there's the old joke. And I didn't remember that it was on HBO, but I do remember watching Beastmaster a lot as a kid. And the old joke is HBO stood for, hey, Beastmaster's on.
And of course, it actually stands for home box office.
Yes.
So that would make sense why it showed a lot of movies.
So that's kind of why, like, I did go to the University of Iowa. I do have a degree in film studies, and I do know my classics, but I grew up on schlock because I just watched what I wanted to watch. I didn't really get monitored a lot as a kid, you know, from what I watched. So I watched stuff like One Crazy Summer, Beastmaster, you know, like The Last Dragon was one of my favorite movies growing up. Barry Gordy's
The Last Dragon. You got to say the full title.
You know, so that's the kind of stuff I grew up on. Even though I know classics and I love classics, I'm going to go back to schlock and cult movies. It's just what I watch. So that being said, what are you recommending for us today?
I forgot to mention a few other anime movies that I'd watched, but I'll just bring them up here. Probably the one that I would recommend the most, that probably has the most to do with kind of the same sci-fi ideas. You know, what does it mean to be human? Am I human? Am I not? Reality versus unreality. I'm going to have to go with Paprika, which is just an absolute joy to watch. Just a visual marvel from the late Satoshi Kon, who died only after making 4 movies, which I think is a real tragedy. Because that movie is just visually inventive, end to end to end. And the way Satoshi Kon thought is that he would always have, whenever he would animate something, he'd always have like one scene, one frame, and he'd always have like, he'd think 4 or 5 pieces ahead, so everything, when it's all edited together, just flows in a very unique and incredible way. So I'd say pick Paprika, which is, you know, and then if you want to argue whether Inception ripped off Paprika, they're very different films. Paprika is a little bit like Inception because, going into dreams, in and out of reality, unreality, except with Paprika, people learn to smile. Well, no offense to Christopher Nolan, he doesn't like smiling people or animated people or emotion.
Well, that was one thing about Ghost in the Shell, too, is that in the manga, the Major is, like, younger and also had, like, a lot of facial features that, like, was very animated in her facial features, and he made a conscious choice to make her older and more contemplative and a little more straight-faced in the movie. Mm-hmm. So he must have the Christopher Nolan sense.
The Nolan Ray.
the Nolan seriousness.
Which is fine. He's a good filmmaker.
I just think Nolan's one of my favorites.
I always think of him as more of a technician versus an artist because, like, his movies are technical marvels, extremely well made, like Inception.
Yeah.
It's done a lot of great stuff. I think I don't have to... I'm not making any waves here when I say that Inception is a good movie.
Yeah.
But at the same time, some of his influence hasn't been not so good because you can draw a straight line from the Dark Knight trilogy, good movies for the most part, and then you can draw a straight line to Batman v Superman, not a good movie.
Yeah. So, I mean, all of his stuff is good to a certain extent, and some of it I consider great. I love The Prestige. I love Batman Begins. I'm one of the few that will say that Batman Begins is a better movie than Dark Knight. I think Dark Knight gets the praise because of Heath Ledger's performance, and I'm not taking away
well deserved.
Which is one of the best acting performances in the history of acting, and so I love The Dark Knight, but I think as an overall movie, I like Batman Begins better.
Also does Scarecrow.
Yes, and Cillian Murphy was so good as a Scarecrow.
Yeah, he originally auditioned to be Batman.
That would have been a different Batman.
Yes.
But anyway, so Paprika. I'm going to have to seek that one out.
That one's pretty easy to find.
I'll have to look that one up.
It's gorgeous. The editing will blow your face.
Awesome. Can't wait to have my mind blown, my face blown off like the guy at the beginning of Ghost in the Shell.
Yeah.
My whole upper body explodes. Okay, so my recommendation, I'm going to cheat and do two because one of them is going to be a little too schlocky, maybe?
To be fair, I've cheated so many times it doesn't even matter anymore.
That's true. You've given all the stuff that it's influenced. We actually recommend most of that stuff. So.
I still haven't seen The Matrix. I only saw The Matrix Revolution when we talked about it on this podcast.
Not recommended, but The Matrix recommended. My first recommendation is, and this is my dedication to the podcast. I sought out like similar movies, like just like lists of similar movies, and I found one, and the only place I could find it that I could watch the whole movie was on YouTube. So I mean, I don't generally recommend going and doing full movies on YouTube, but if it's there, it's there. And I watched a 1962 movie called The Creation of the Humanoids. This is low budget.
Does it have Roger Corman?
No.
Wow.
But it's almost like a few set pieces that are like old school Doctor Who bad. But the thing is that I recommend it as the double feature because I found it fascinating. It's almost all dialogue. There is no action. It is pretty much all dialogue. It's a post-apocalyptic world. The opening credits are over like this giant mushroom cloud.
See the human, to become like the human. Roman.
And you find that like we're in this world where the radiation from the bomb, because there was a world war that wiped out like everything, and the radiation is all over the world, and it's slowly diminishing the human population because they can't. It makes
giant ants.
They can't.
Them.
They can't reproduce. The reproduction rate is low and getting lower, and so they've created robots that are starting to get more and more human-like, and they're given levels like up to R7 is just your basic robot that can do menial work. So it's just doing jobs and stuff and keeping things running. But then there's some that are like up to R40 or 50, and those are ones that you can have a conversation with. They actually look human, except for they're bald, and they've got like this bluish gray skin and like these weird eyes. And the makeup is actually done by Jack Pierce, I think his name is, and he did the movies back in the 30s for Universal.
He did the Universal Monster movies.
Yeah. So like Frankenstein and Dracula and Mummy and all that stuff, which when I was reading up on that, they didn't really care for him. Lon Chaney had issues with him and said he burned him on purpose with the soldering the yak hair onto him. But anyway, he did the makeup and stuff for this. And so then they've been secretly working with this doctor to create an R96. So 4 points shy of full human, but it's a robot and it's got emotions, everything. The only reason it's missing those 4 points is because it can't reproduce. But they're trying to create this. Robots are designed to help the human race, kind of like the iRobot, the three.
The Isaac Asimov sort of
the Isaac Asimov thing. They can't hurt humans. They have to use logic, but they also can't offend humans. So there's a lot of scenes in the movie where they're like, I have to tell you this, but then I'm sorry if I offend, they apologize for offending. And like some things you go, I can't tell you this because in order to tell you logically exactly what I need to tell you, it would offend you. So that's conflicting. So they have R96s, which can do, can laugh, cry, all this stuff. And there's a main character who is part of the basically a hate group. It's almost like the Ku Klux Klan, because this was made in the 60s when there's a lot of civil rights stuff going on. So there had a vibe of that where like they were racist against these robots. It was like kind of a quasi-racist thing, and which was fascinating. But then you find out later that they actually made 15 of these R96s and they've been infiltrating them into human things. And you find out that this man and then a girl that he falls in love with are two of the R96s. And then later in the movie, he has trouble coming to terms with that because he's part of the group that's trying to squash the robots and keep humans going. And then it's all about, the reason I recommend it is it's all about what makes you human, because he thinks he's human, but they actually found, got to his body and pulled his consciousness out in time to put it into a robot body and left his memories and made him not realize he's a robot. So then he thinks and feels like a human. So it's like, well, if I think and feel like a human and I believe I'm a human, does that make me human? And I liked the ending too, because it was one of those where they go, well, we do have the technology to make you R100s. And so it's two robots and they're like, well, that means we can reproduce. And then it cuts and like the doctor turns to the screen and goes, well, obviously the experiment worked because otherwise you wouldn't be here. The end.
Nice. Nice.
But it was a really fascinating movie if you get past
the budget.
And if you just listen to the dialogue, and a lot of it is a lot of similar dialogue to what you find in the 1995 Ghost in the Shell.
It almost sounds like a Twilight Zone episode.
As I was watching it, I almost thought like this would make a great like half-hour Twilight Zone episode back then. But I don't think that it was too long either. Like it didn't feel too long. It was like an hour and a half.
Interesting.
So, but if you can't get past that, then the other recommendation I'm going to do is one that most people have seen, and I hope you have. And if you haven't, go watch it. 1987's RoboCop.
Yeah, I can see that.
And that's more of a, but that's a similar thing to that one. The last one I just recommended, where they take a dead human and create a robot out of him. And then, finally he starts like his memories start coming back and all that stuff. And he's like, oh, am I human or am I robot? Like, what is it more of, and then there's lots of violence and shooting
and Paul Verhoeven satire.
Yes. And Paul Verhoeven. I love that, like, he created this movie and put just uber violence to make a point of how violent movies are getting. It's almost like, okay.
Yeah.
It's a weird kind of satire, because it's like you're making this uber violent to make a point about how movies are getting too violent. So
some of it doesn't quite hit as intended, but
But I love the movie for everything that's in it. So, and this is where you get, I'll buy that for $1.
Sure, it is a very memorable movie. And one thing you also want to know is that the RoboCop hates glass. That movie hates glass. It's so much glass shattering in that movie.
Well, it just goes along with all the violence. Oh man, when people get shot, they get shot.
Hooray for practical effects.
And it's also got the, there's the spider robot or Spider Tank in Ghost in the Shell. This one's got the Ed 209.
Yep.
So, and this
Spider Robot could probably do better on stairs.
And this is also a cop movie like Ghost in the Shell, so that's another...
I mean, I'm sure that the manga artist or someone saw it because, movies were imported over there all the time. And
yeah, but those are my recommendations. And like I said, the other one, low budget, but if you can watch something like that, I would actually recommend it. I kind of enjoyed it a little bit.
So what you're saying is that the best RoboCop is RoboCop 3 because he has a jetpack.
Directed by Fred Decker. I actually don't remember much of...
I didn't watch RoboCop 2 or 3. I know it by reputation of being bad.
I know that I've seen both of them because that's the kind of stuff I gravitate towards. And loving RoboCop, I'm like, well, of course I got to see RoboCop 2 and 3. But
the RoboCop cartoon.
I didn't watch the RoboCop cartoon, no.
But what's interesting about RoboCop 3 is sort of the original script written by... a version of the script written by Frank Miller... the comic book Frank Miller, the Dark Knight Returns Frank Miller, the 300 Frank Miller, the Sin City Frank Miller, but also the All-Star Batman and Robin Frank Miller, which is not good. This was Frank Miller before he went crazy and was actually adapted, and that actually was adapted into a comic book. So I've heard Frank Miller's RoboCop 3 comic book is pretty good.
I'll have to check that out.
And now we come to our favorite part of this show and every show.
I just almost blanked on that. I gotta grab my phone. It's just right here.
I'm gonna stall and talk to Simba. Our studio cat.
He is sleeping on the couch.
He is a good boy.
All right. Do we want to do all genres? Do we want to do... we just did animation.
Before that, we did a drama. Before that, we did sci-fi, thriller-y, whatever. I don't know. We could do a comedy again.
You want to do a comedy or an action-adventure? What are you thinking? Comedy?
Comedy. I'm always in the mood for a good comedy.
Okay, let's go comedy. Rotten Tomato, 90% or better. And spin the wheel. We have Leap Year from 2010. Okay, what do we got here? This is on Netflix. It's a Mexican movie. And it's the tag just says mature. So there may be mature things in there.
Oh, no.
This is supposed to be a comedy, though. What? This is a drama/romance. Did something screw up there?
Yeah, let's try again for comedy there. I've got nothing against the genre, but...
I'm sorry, folks. I put in comedy, and they gave me a drama romance. So I'm going to spin again. This one's a comedy drama.
Is it the day the clown cried?
No.
Thank goodness, no.
From that's reputation, I don't think it has a 90% or better.
No.
This one is Marjorie Prime, and you can find it on Prime Video.
And this is so it's just a woman who really likes Amazon Prime and falls in love with
yes, Marjorie Prime
falls in love with Echo.
Yes, it's very similar to her.
Yes. Except this time it's voiced by Joaquin Phoenix.
Oh, well, wait, you're not too far off. A service which creates holographic projections of late family members allows an elderly woman to spend time with a younger version of her deceased husband. Oh, Marjorie Prime featuring John Hamm and Gina Davis from 2017.
Huh.
I've never even heard of this.
Great cast.
Yeah, it's on Prime Video. So...
we'll have to check it out.
Go and check that out and come back for our next episode.
And as always, you can find us on Twitter at Noah_Saturn.
And I am at AwesomeKM.
We have an Instagram. Check that out.
We do, and that is just at We Don't Know What to Watch on Instagram. So until next time, I think, therefore I am.
I do, therefore I am. Doobie 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 doo.